producer, and the sequence, I don't know whether we are brilliant or lucky, but the sequence of the speeches were quite extraordinarily fitting together. And Dr. Ravi Madhavan is our cleanup hitter, and he's always been that at our BOH conferences, because while he's, how shall I say it, not the same vintage as me for sure, but he's always provided us with an elder statesman perspective on things. And I think he's going to draw the conversation back to a larger perspective in terms of the context in which we'll be working. So Dr. Madhavan is a professor of strategy at the Katz Graduate School of Business and a friend and colleague for a long time. But let me get out of the way and let him speak to you.
Good morning and Dobry din to our hosts in Prague. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I know by this time in the morning, all of you probably feel like a kitchen sponge that's been left in the sink for too long. There's been a lot of information that's been thrown at you. So I'm not going to add a great deal to that. I just have two messages. This is important stuff. Whose time has come? And I want to sort of reinforce those points by sort of drawing back a little bit and looking at the larger picture and how it connects to several things that are going on in the global space today. Grant already referred to the very striking number of 1.5 times, which is Peter Senge's way of capturing the notion that the way we live and consume today on a global basis is really at 1.5 times the carrying capacity of the earth. And the reasons are familiar to all of us. Hyper-industrialization, right? What took in the first wave of industrialization several decades to cover 1/4 of the world population is now taking place in a few years, covering 3/4 of the world. And a very interesting sub-component of that, to my mind, is the rapid urbanization that's going on in the world. Again, many of you may be aware, sometime around 2006, 2007, for the first time in human history, we now have more people living in cities than there are outside cities. And that has great implications for consumption. It has great implications for innovation. It's great implications for the way this project might unfold. As a professor of strategy and as a scholar who's interested in how societies create wealth, I like to look at this number more as an opportunity and say, what are some ways in which we might see new types of wealth being created as we deal with this particular challenge? I began thinking about it when I read this fascinating story in the New York Times in the year 2006, where they reported on an experiment that Airbus was doing with a new kind of cabin layout. Now, most of you flew in planes to get here, and we had more or less comfortable seats. But in this, what Airbus was doing is they were looking at certain sectors of air travel. For instance, in between Beijing and Shanghai in China. And according to some of their projections, they figured that if those growth patterns held, we were not very far from a time period where there just wasn't enough space in the air for the number of planes that they would need to meet that traffic. Now, one solution, of course, was the high-speed rail, which China has gone toward. But another solution that they were considering was to ask the question, why do people need to sit in a short flight? Let them stand, right? So you take out all the seats, and clearly what that means is that you have much less weight, right? And you stand with your back to the wall and you're strapped to the wall. It's as safe as anything else. And they were actually working on it. But interestingly, now obviously, when you hear a story like this, you'll have different thoughts in your mind. So it will be no surprise to you when I tell you that 2 days later there was a retraction in the New York Times saying that Airbus denied that this was ever a serious idea. It was just something that they were planning. But to my mind, it really captures the fact that when we think about new models of growth, there is both a technical challenge and there's a social challenge. The technical challenge perhaps is not great in this particular example, but the social challenge is great. All right? Starting from around 2006, I've been looking at this, what I call the new models of growth, and there are very, very interesting examples around the world. And I use this acronym REAL to help myself think about all of this. R stands for restoration. There's a lot of damage that's been done to the world, which needs to be fixed. And again, it's a value-creating opportunity. In Pittsburgh, for instance, there are various civil sector organizations like GTech, which works on greening of the brownfield parts of the city. There's a lot, if you travel in China or India, you'll see a lot of room for restoration activity, whether it be mines that have been abandoned, whether there is a lot of damage that our current way of living has done. Efficiency, it's very much a sub-theme in our conversations today, but not just in a technical way. Think about what Zipcar has done in the United States and now worldwide. That's a different consumption model, which really says most people do not really need a car for more than maybe 2 hours a week if you are an urban dweller. Right? Then why do you need a car? Or why do you have them go to the airport to pick up a car for 2 days? Why not just have a car parked on every street and have them use their iPhone to make a reservation, get in? It's clearly a very revolutionary kind of idea, which is trying to make the system more efficient. A different aspect of it is adaptation, trying to think of clearly new models. Again, the Airbus standing room only example is a good illustration of that. In many ways, I see the DC initiative that we are talking about as overlapping both efficiency and adaptation. And for a moment, if we think about the economic value of these kinds of activities, it's huge. The idea of the Internet of Everything, right, which seeks to connect all the various devices, the meters, the consuming devices, etc., put it to the internet. One of the things that Cisco has been working on. It's been estimated that the economic value at stake runs into the tens of trillions of dollars. So there is wealth here. There's a reason for those of us who are business school professors to be associated with this idea, I believe. And the L part of it's the learning. IBM is a good example. Their whole eco-efficiency initiative. Billions of dollars of consulting revenue coming from dealing with problems like this. So there's a very interesting set of initiatives that's going on, which goes to my point about the time has come for initiatives like this. And a very specific example of that I've been involved in over the last couple of years is this whole phenomenon of de novo cities. That is, people saying, there is so much room for experimentation here, and perhaps the best way to experiment is to start an entirely new city, just so that you start from scratch and you can experiment for some of these things. This is a shot I took from in a place called Songdo. This is just a short drive away from Seoul's Incheon Airport in South Korea, where they reclaimed land from the Yellow Sea and have invested about $35 billion. It's a partnership between a few Korean entities and an American real estate company. Fascinating concept, including testing out brand new technologies. One very interesting instance of it is pneumatic trash collection systems. And this by no means is the only example. I visited another city called Lavasa in India. Different concept, but again, going to a completely new area, building a whole new city from scratch and using that as an opportunity, as a crucible for testing new technologies. And obviously, there can be smaller portions of that, for instance, a smaller development within a city. I was captivated by Jeff's mention of doing this whole thing in a ship. Right? So what better way to experiment with something like this, because then you can control some of the connections and so on. When I think about some of these experiments, there are two things that come to mind in terms of lessons that I think we should keep in mind as we go into the discussions later. One has to do with the importance of cross-sector partnerships. Right? The Coca-Cola's Neville Isdell talks about what he describes as the golden triangle. That is, in order to solve problems of this scale, you really need a partnership between government, the civil sector, the non-profits, and business. And these are not problems that can be solved by any one of these entities. And what that has also implications for the way we teach our students, whether these are business school students or in other schools. But that's one lesson. But the other lesson, which is equally important, is that piloting things is not enough. So the importance of what one might call scaling up for impact is really very, very crucial. We know how to do pilots. Right? Given enough money and given enough time, we can make any concept work within very narrowly defined premises. But the challenge really is, how do we scale it up? And in order to actually impact at an important enough level. And so I just want to leave this thought with you, that as we think about our initiative, it may be helpful to try to think about how does it fit in terms of the technological challenges and in terms of the social challenges. And by social, I don't just mean the consumer, but what are the changes that need to take place in terms of the relationships between the different players, the different actors in the space. So if you look at the different examples, there are some instances like IBM's eco-efficiency initiative that are probably both on a technical level and a social level incremental, relatively easy to implement. Zipcar, or another very interesting startup in the US called O-Power, which works with consumers of electricity. Probably, again, technically not very sophisticated. Essentially, all they're doing is to use currently existing IT, but working with the way that people think about consumption. So those are a little bit further up there. I don't know where the DC grids fit. That might be an interesting conversation for us to have in our breakout groups. What is the level of technological challenge and what is the level of social challenge? But thinking about it in those terms might help us to get our hands around the implementation aspect. But I'm going to stop there with that, and all I want to say is I'm looking forward to the rest of today as well. Thank you.